everybody, welcome back. It's day 6. You're going to be able to tell just by how I look and sound as this trial goes on. The wear is going to become increasingly evident. So I do apologize for that. Hopefully I don't lose my voice over the course of this. Well, boy, what a day, guys. I have a hard time even knowing where to start. I have a hard time even knowing where to start. There's just so much to talk about. I'll give you the 10,000 foot view like I do. Today was all about the crime scene. Today was all about the crime scene. Pretty much from beginning to end. We saw lots of photos, so many photos. Learned a lot about the collection, the examination and collection of evidence that was done at the scene. Definitely have some reactions to that. I very much have some thoughts about that. If you're on Twitter, you may have seen the exciting thing in my life was I filed a motion in the case this morning. Somebody needed to do it. Somebody needed to do it. Why not me? Why not me? So I filed it. So I did a motion for public access. I'm requesting that basically the public should be able to go in and view the exhibits on the same footing as the press, which to me is just a no-brainer. No legal basis for any kind of distinction there between who gets access to information and so forth. But I also took it a little step further and I filed a motion to request the audio recordings of the hearings. This is just getting ridiculous, guys. It's getting ridiculous. This place is becoming a shit show. It's really getting out of control. Starting to become hard to avoid the conclusion that it's by design, that it's chaotic like this because that's how she wants it. And so that's how it's going to continue to be. Unless we can find some other way to get people access to the information, and the direct source is the best way to do it. The recordings are already being made; they're already a public record, so they should be available. As you know, they're not. So if you head on over to my Substack or to my Twitter account, you can read that motion if you're interested in it. I didn't really hold back. Yeah, we're making a record. We're telling things how they are here. So I'm on 36 hours without sleep, and I'm gonna have to pretty much turn right around here and head back to the courtroom if I want to get in tomorrow. So this is not going to be a super long one, guys. There's not going to be a ton to go over anyway as far as the details of what happened in court today. Because, like I said, it was exhibit after exhibit after exhibit after exhibit. Not a ton of detail in the testimony. So I'm gonna try to get maybe a couple hours and then head back over there. Midnight-ish. I don't know, and try to get some sleep on the steps there. This is the life, guys. Who would choose this, right? Who would choose this life? Well, here I am. So let me go ahead and start with, of course, the really important stuff that I know so many of you care about. Mr. Rosie's on his tie watch. He had a great tie today. It was this orange, like tangerine kind of orange tie with a yellow diagonal stripe on it. And he was wearing that on top of like a very light baby blue shirt and a charcoal gray suit. It was quite flashy. It was quite eye-catching. Wouldn't normally think, orange tie with blue shirt, but really pulled it off. Mr. Allen was in gray and white stripes on his shirt today. So I know some of you are very interested in those kinds of details. Don't want to let you down. I'm still not able to see the socks though. I'm sorry. It's just we just don't have the greatest view of everything that's going on in there. So yeah, start off with this morning. I got there at 5:09 or at 4:09 this morning. I would have been there earlier. As you may know from last week, I missed Saturday because I flew back home. I had to watch my girl go kick ass, win her first fight. She did so amazing. It was awesome. I'm so glad I went. It was just a great event for everybody. We had several fighters. Everybody won. One of our guys got fight of the night. Like, it was just, it was a great evening. But that means that I was a little short on time and sleep coming back. And I had this motion to write, and I had to figure out, how this whole e-filing system and so forth. So didn't get out there quite as early as I had anticipated I would. And at 4:09, I wasn't going to make it in. Wasn't going to make it in. I was too late. Isn't this crazy? Guys, this is nuts. I mean, this is really, really nuts. It's getting chaotic. And it's starting to get, there's starting to be drama, So today's drama, the reason why I got in is because, Julie Melvin, who's a local here, in the community, been following this case, obviously, since it happened. I met her the first day that we were here for trial, and she's apparently watched my channel, likes my stuff. Thanks, Julie, appreciate it. And so she's got her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend are line sitting for her, and apparently the other person who was supposed to, who's getting the other seat that she had, she was getting saved, didn't show up. And so she had an extra seat. And so her daughter said, Mom, you got to give it to Andrea. So they did. They came and offered it to me. Well, it made some people very unhappy to see me going forward, even though it absolutely changes nobody's place in line, changes nobody's position. But, it is what it is. So I did make it in the courtroom. Thank you to Julie. Really appreciate that. That was very generous of you, and also your daughter and her boyfriend, who were enduring the cold and the hard concrete, sleeping in a crappy little travel chair. Yeah, it meant a lot to me to go ahead and get that option. So we started off the day with a Deputy Darren Janola. Mr. McLeland doesn't ask the witnesses to spell their names. It's the most annoying thing. The other lawyers so far have been very good about doing that, but Mr. McLeland does not. And so, again, because it continues to be a little bit hard to hear, I'm kind of doing my best at the phonetics, and as the day goes on, kind of get a better and better idea of who these people are, what the names are and stuff. So Darren Giancola, he is a detective now, but at the time, on February 13th of 2017, he wasn't on duty. He was on patrol. He was on patrol shift at that time. He was on the night shift of 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And he was not scheduled to work that day, but he had seen on social media about the missing girls, and so decided he was gonna go in to help. So he got in about 10. Got in about 10. And learned it was Abby and Libby. He was at the jail first. This was an interesting piece of information that came up first in his testimony. Everybody's ears kind of popped up that he started off his day when he decided to help out. He went to the jail, went to the sheriff's office, and was looking at electronics that belonged to one of the girls, but they were locked. And everyone went, I thought the phone was out at the scene. We learned later that it was an iPad. It was a separate device. But so they had been trying to get the record of communications, contacts, things like that might give them a hint about where the girls had gone. So after he did that, he was then asked to go ahead and help with the physical search. So went out to the driveway that we've heard about that goes underneath the Monon High Bridge on the south side of the creek. He searched a little bit of an area south of there. Now this is at night. This is now when he went in. It was about 10 p.m. to do the looking at the electronics, and so he's out now doing the search at about midnight. Because it's so dark, they have a flashlight. Makes it very difficult to see very far. So it's kind of setting the stage for how it would be really easy to miss stuff out there looking around in the dark. So kind of contrary to the point the defense is wanting to make, that the girls couldn't have been there because with this massive search party going on, they would have stumbled across it. It kind of sounds like, I mean, unless you pretty much step right on something, you may not see it under these circumstances. So he was out there in that area for the search for that evening, the whole night until it got called off about 2 in the morning. He went back the next morning, and there had been something that that stuck out while he was there. This is actually backpedal, guys. You're gonna have to forgive me. My brain is like not wired correctly after after everything we've gone through in the last 36 hours. Still that night, while he's searching in the area underneath the bridge, he sees something that catches his attention. So he describes these like blocks of concrete or limestone or something like that are in a big pile under there, big sections. So he's climbing up on that to try to get a better look. And over on the side of the hill, he saw what he described as a disturbance in the leaves on the side of the hill that was exposing the bare ground, and it seemed odd to him. So he went to kind of take a look, and it's coming from the end of the Monon High Bridge and going down towards the left-hand side. So we had several pictures of this, and it just looks like kind of a, just like a clearing. Like if you had a rake, you got the whole ground is completely covered in dry leaves and twigs and stuff like that. So if you like kind of grabbed a rake and just hit a spot and cleared it all out, that's kind of what it looked like. I mean, it's just this little bare area right there with no real explanation for it. So we saw, like five photos of that. He was with a fire department. Somebody from the fire department was searching with him. That's who pointed it out to him. And so they just made notice of it, continued to search until about 2 a.m. and then called off the search. So they went home, rested, and came back out at about 7:30. This deputy said he had no idea at this point that they were investigating a murder. There's been many cases like this where kids, just kind of turn up missing. And so he's thinking, oh, it's a runaway, or they went to see a movie and wandered off. This kind of thing happens, but the kids usually turn up. So he showed back up at 7:30. First went to the sheriff's office and was tasked with contacting the landowners in the area to get permission to be on their property to continue their search onto the private property. He then went to he was heading to like a different part of the county road. We've heard about this 300 North. That is the road that goes past the Hoosier Harvest store and gets you to the Freedom Bridge trailhead. Connects to Main Street. I can just tell you because I've been in that area. It connects to Main Street, and so you can head back into downtown from there. So he was heading in a different direction out on this county road because they had heard that there were a whole bunch of trail cameras. Somebody had trail cameras out on their property, and so they were going to go ahead and pull the footage. He was tasked with going to get it. But on the way there, he got a call from Sheriff Liggett, who called and told him to go to the cemetery. So he went there, and with Deputy Yoder, who we haven't heard from yet, but I'm sure we will soon, they walked, or maybe he was on Saturday. He might have been on Saturday. I forget because I wasn't there Saturday. I did, by the way, watch the recap with Lawyer Lee. It was awesome. So thank you, Lawyer Lee, for that. But I don't remember the names. I don't remember if Deputy Yoder was one of the ones who talked on Saturday. I think he might have been. So they walked from the cemetery down into the woods and described it as a very steep wooded area down towards the creek. And as he was on his way down, he passed a woman coming back up who was very distraught. So he walked straight towards the creek from the southeast corner of the cemetery. And so it would be on the far side of this ravine that some of the other folks have described. Derek German described this ravine as being kind of the furthest he could go when he was searching the woods, starting from the bridge and the bridge trail, because it was too steep to cross. He walked straight down to the creek and did not see the girls, but he was notified that the girls had been found. He got to the water's edge and was able to see 4 people over on the north side, a couple people directly across from him on the south side. When he was at the creek, everyone was pointing into the water, and in the water he saw a multicolored shirt and a tennis shoe that was stuck in the roots of trees over on the creek bank, but still in the water. So we saw photographs of that as well, of just kind of his line of sight from his perspective there. So he was hollering. They were hollering back and forth across the creek with the people down there, and somebody on his side of the creek, on the north side, believed that the bodies had been found behind them, but he hadn't seen them on the way down. So from his vantage point, he could see a whitish color that that kind of stood out, but he couldn't make out what it was. So he approached, and there he saw it was the bodies of both girls. They were both deceased. One was nude and one was clothed, and he recognized them from the photos that had been circulating. They both had large lacerations to their throat. The deputy is very, he's worked up when he's describing this testimony. He's having to take deep breaths. You can just tell that remembering this, he's got a clear memory of it, and it is not something he is enjoying reliving at all. He says there's a substantial amount of blood on the bodies and underneath. He got to within about 10 yards of the bodies. There was nobody nearby. He did not do any life-saving measures because it was obvious that it would be futile. When he described his walk down the creek, the path that he took, it was about between 30 to 40 yards away from where the girls were ultimately found. So it was about half a football field, third of a football field to the far side of that ravine. And then we later heard that it's not too far from the creek, maybe 40, 50 feet back from the creek. So Mr. Yoder was taking down the names of the people that were in the area. Gotta look up his name again to remember how to pronounce it. Giancola. I think it's an Italian name, Giancola, something like that. He had phone service, so he called Liggett, told him, and then he stood by to make sure that nobody wandered through onto the scene. Nobody got closer, he says, on his watch than within about 10 yards. The troopers were the first to arrive. They got there within minutes, and then they began to... They started like a crime scene log. They put up crime scene tape to seal the area. You know, the things that they should have done in the Karen Reed case that we heard about that they didn't do. Yeah, these guys were on it within, probably 90 seconds or so. Within minutes, he said. And so after the crime scene tape was up, nobody entered beyond that. We heard over the course of the day that they taped off a very large area, like much larger than just where, like right next to where the bodies were. And that's basically what they're trained to do, to make sure if there's things in the area, they don't want to overlook it. They want to have plenty of room to make sure that they get everything that's going to be relevant. He said that you would be able to access that scene by crossing the water. And so he ended up staying at his post there all night until around 8 or 9 p.m. the next day when somebody came in to relieve him. So nobody came through. There was no traffic on the driveway. Nobody crossed the creek. either the state or the defense with most of these law enforcement witnesses is now eliciting whether they were carrying a firearm, and if so, what it was. So he indicated he was carrying his issue firearm, which was a Glock 17 9mm. He said that the department had just recently switched to that gun. Before that, it was, he didn't specify what it was. So all the officers now have this Glock 17 9mm. That's their duty weapon, and that had been within the last year that switch had taken place. Mr. Baldwin did the cross-examination. He wanted to emphasize how steep the area was where Deputy, gotta look at it again, Deputy Giancola, where he'd seen that disturbance. So you come off the end of the bridge and over there to the left-hand side, and it's kind of right up there at the top. It's very steep. Mr. Baldwin wanted to emphasize this is a very steep area, like you would need to use your hands to hold on to trees and stuff like that in order to get yourself down. Very high risk that you would probably fall. The other side is not as steep, or at least that is what was suggested. So he was surprised to see the marks. Deputy Giancola was surprised to see them. He just hadn't, I think, expected to see that. There had been marks underneath the leaves and the dirt. And we heard later from a different witness that these may have been some footprints, and that they may have been footprints that appeared to be consistent with, I believe it was Libby's shoes, one of the girls' shoes. I'll verify that when I get to that point. Mr. Baldwin elicited that Deputy Giancola, remember, had been on his way to collect the trail camera videos when he was called to go to the cemetery. So he asked if he ever then followed up and went and got it. He did not. So I don't know if anybody ever did go and get that trail camera video, but it does not sound promising. It sounds like that was just kind of left. He said that people on the opposite side of the creek saw the shirt. So I think he means on the south side of the creek, where, like, if you cross the bridge and go down over on that side, they had seen the shirt. It was right off the bank from where he was on the north side. He said he just described the scene a little bit more, seeing substantial blood around both of them. Libby had it all around her, all on and around her. Libby had it around her. He said Abby had it around her. He said he didn't remember if he saw any blood on Abby's body. Her clothing appeared to be wet, though. There wasn't, like, a cutoff point, like a line where it went from wet to dry, where it would be really obvious. But just notice that the pants appeared to be wet. They asked him, because he had been able to make that phone call to Liggett in that area, they asked him what his cell phone carrier was. He didn't remember if he was using his personal cell phone or his work cell phone. His personal cell phone carrier was AT&T, which is interesting because that's the same carrier that, we heard that Libby used, Libby's phone. And he did not recall specifically for the sheriff's office. It was switched at some point to, I didn't quite catch the name, Versanet or something that's like a subsidiary of AT&T. But he didn't know when that switch had taken place, so he couldn't remember what the carrier was at that point in time. But interesting it would be if it was on his personal phone. It just goes to that argument that if the girls' phones weren't able to connect, it's because it wasn't because of a problem with the signal in the area. They did this with several witnesses, make a point of establishing that the area where the girls were found is not perfectly flat. It's kind of like this undulating area where they described it where you come down from the cemetery and it's initially quite steep. And then you hit an area and it's kind of like you have a series of like step offs where it's high and then it's low and then maybe it goes high again. So it's not perfectly flat by any means. It is still above the grade of like the level of where the water was, the elevation of the water. And so in this kind of up and down, the girls were in a dip. They were in a low part of the ground. The jury is who asked the question. The jury did ask some questions today. So they offered two questions to Deputy Janola. Only one of them was asked. One was not asked. And so the question that was asked was, you said electronics were being viewed before the search. What were the items? What were these electronic items? And so that's when he clarified it was an iPad, that it was locked, and they were able to see numbers on it that they then called those numbers, and it ended up being Libby's family members. So looks like it was just kind of reporting the same information that maybe would have been available on her phone. Second witness was Sergeant Jason Page. He was one of the crime scene investigators with the Indiana State Police. So we heard from 3 of the crime scene investigators today. And they described their job: document the crime scene, collect the evidence, secure the evidence, store the evidence. And so they go through training for that. And they have kind of a relationship with the lab. They work with the laboratory very closely. They typically transport the stuff that they collect that's going to need testing and things like that. They transport it to the lab. So they work closely with the analysts and with folks like the forensic pathologist and stuff to kind of get a sense of what should you collect and what's going to be helpful and fruitful and so forth. Sergeant Page said he's processed probably somewhere between 950 and 100 scenes, and that's just as a crime scene investigator, not including some time that he spent as a detective. So he went out on February the 14th. He was contacted to ask for assistance. So this is after the girls had been discovered. He was not part of the search. So he arrived about 1:30 in the afternoon and parked at the cemetery. Describes kind of same thing, walked down a steep hill and found the crime scene barrier tape. A lot of officers present, but not within the perimeter, and ran into the two other crime scene investigators. Inside the barrier tape, he described, was about the size of a football field. So, like I said, large area that they blocked off. What they did then was, and in fact, Deputy Janola had described this, they had this yellow rope that they tied around a tree kind of at the edge of the perimeter. And then as they would walk into any area, they'd be watching the ground, looking to see if there was anything there that needed to be collected or monitored or anything. And as they continued, they would string the rope like to another tree to kind of follow their path. And so then that way that would tell them basically where it's safe to walk, that if you walked along this rope, that area has been cleared. You're not gonna step on anything or taint something or anything. In the inside perimeter around where the bodies were, they described this as ground zero, and so this is just right around the areas where the girls were found. So that's when we started getting photographs. We got photographs of the scene. We got photographs of diagrams that were prepared. I'll show you. I'm a terrible artist. I tried to kind of copy the diagram. It showed where the girls were oriented, where the sticks were placed. There were 2 trees on the diagram that he noted, and then 2 larger pools of blood, and then some small like driplets and droplets and things like that. And then the last thing that was marked on this diagram was just area he described as like a disturbed area. So again, the leaves had kind of been moved, and the bare ground was there. And then, yeah, we saw lots and lots of photos. Lots of photos. It's not pretty. Really, 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 really not pretty. Not pretty at all. So, the way the scene was laid out, Libby was nude. Both of the girls were on their backs. Libby was like almost crammed next to a fairly large tree. It was like a twin tree, you know, one that has a twin trunk. So it's got a very fat trunk. Her head is down at the base of the trunk. There's this very, very, very large tree limb, like 15 feet plus long, 4 inches diameter, maybe. I mean, this is a big limb that is kind of along the side of her body. So her left hand is up in the air. Her right hand is down, and her throat is cut. Her throat is cut. Yeah, really, really unpleasant. Abby was clothed. We saw photos of Abby later on. They didn't take so many photos of Abby at this point in time. They expressed that the reason why is because since Libby was nude, it was easier to see. Did she have injuries? Did she have debris? Did she have, you know, signs of like where there might have been places where evidence could have landed. And so they basically just decided to process her, and then looked at Abby second, because the clothing made it harder to see, you know, the debris and things like that. Let me give you my observations. There were some notable characteristics, I thought, about the bodies. And so what stood out to me was a couple of blood stain patterns on Libby. The first one was what appeared to be blood flow from her neck going down her face. So kind of upside down. It's not flowing in the direction if she was upright and, you know, and it would just flow. It was like towards her eyes, towards her nose, towards her mouth. On her right thigh, there were several droplets of blood that had then run, and they had run perpendicular to her leg. So not like it falls down your body and then gravity takes it down and it's parallel with the line of your leg. It was going the other way. It was across her leg. So to me, these were very indicative of movement. You know, at a bare minimum, this was indicative of these bodies were not in the position that they were found in. The girls were not in the position. Libby was not in the position she was found in when the blood was moving the way it was to create these patterns. Libby had quite a lot of blood on her. She had blood on both of her hands. She had like a bib almost coming down from her throat. She had some blood on the bottom of her foot, blood on her legs, blood between her legs. When she was turned over, she had blood on her backside. Abby, by contrast, was almost perfectly clean. Her hands, when she was found, they were tucked into the sweatshirt, and they were in a posture kind of like this. Like the deputy described it almost as like a defensive fighting posture, like a high guard. So her hands had been inside inside the sweatshirt, but they pulled the sleeves down to inspect her. And her hands are pristine. There's no dirt. There's no blood. They review like her torso. You know, lift the shirt up to look at the condition of her torso. Pristine, clean, nothing on it. The only place there really was a little bit of dirt on Abby was on her foot. She was wearing, I believe, one shoe, and the shoe was partially off her foot, and so she had a little bit of like dirt and in the leaf debris, twig debris, things like that on her foot. She had some blood on her face as well, and very, very horrifying wound on the left side of her neck. I will say a couple other things odd about this scene. You may have heard about the F tree. There's a tree that the way the scene is positioned, the girls are kind of in a V shape with respect to each other, where their feet are closer, but their heads are further apart. They're 4 or 5 feet apart from each other, like, you know, pretty close. To the kind of 2 o'clock maybe from Abby's feet, there is a tree, and this tree has blood stains on it. It has blood marks on it. There's one blood mark described as very high, and that is on the opposite side of the tree from where the girls' bodies are found. There's a second blood stain that's about halfway down the trunk from the first blood stain, halfway down towards the ground. It's on the side of the tree. So this is just a little bit odd too, because had the girls, you know, been killed in this spot, there's no way for the blood to get to the opposite side of the tree. Somehow, you know, that got transferred there, whether it was by a hand, something else, whether it was deliberate or accidental, you know, who knows at this point. There was not, from my perspective, there was not nearly as much blood at this scene as I would expect if they had been killed there. Given how they were killed, the nature of their injuries, only serious injury either of them had was these, you know, cuts to the throat. So we haven't heard the autopsy yet, but pretty sure we're going to have a cause of death that's going to be exsanguination, or it's going to be, you know, I'm not sure what you would call that, but it's just inability to breathe and loss of oxygen and brain death and stuff. But there's going to just be massive blood loss from these injuries. The human body, average human body, contains what? Something like 7 liters of blood. I mean, it's a really massive amount. I've never seen, I will say this, I've never seen crime scene photos of this type in an outdoor scene like this. I've seen quite a few of them indoors, like on carpet and stuff, that you would think, okay, well, it might soak some up, you know, and so you wouldn't necessarily have like a large puddle, large pooling, stuff like that. No, it does. It just does. Like, blood is thick. It really doesn't seep well into stuff. This ground surface, like I said, this is all dried leaves and twigs and stuff. This is not, I mean, and like a pretty thick cover. So this is not particularly, you know, I'm losing my words here. It's just, it's not gonna absorb. It's not very absorbent. So I would have expected substantially more blood than there was at this scene. The state is clearly focusing on the largest blood spot in this area is basically between and like 12 o'clock from the feet of both of the girls. It's hard to tell from the photographs at this point exactly how large it is. Of course, you can't tell, you know, how far it seeped into the ground or anything like that. But I do notice it doesn't. There's not like congealing or stuff like you know, puddles of blood will congeal. It gets pretty gross. So it's hard to estimate the size of this puddle, but if I were going to guess, I would say it's roughly the size of like a tea towel, you know, not a like a full size bath towel, but the smaller towel that you use to what, you know, dry your hands and stuff. It's really not that big. There is a small amount of blood directly under the girls where you could tell it would have seeped. It would have, you know, seeped out from their injuries. But that also nowhere near the volume of blood of the human body. So this is raising a lot of questions for me. I'm definitely going to want to hear more about this because just to me, my view, my eye, no, it doesn't look like they were killed there. Not to me. Not to me. And then there's just these other circumstances with you know, how the blood had flowed, where it was on the trees and stuff like that that just they don't add up to a simple story of he had the girls down there, killed them quickly and you know, went about his way in 15 minutes. It just doesn't look like that at all. I did try to watch the jury a little bit while we were seeing all these photographs. Wanted to see how they took it in. Most of them were pretty stoic. There was a couple of moments. There's a man in the front row who basically, when these photos would come up, he would have his hand over his mouth. He would sit with his hand over his mouth while he watched the whole thing. And then at one point, one of the men in the back row, you know, I saw him kind of wiping his eyes. Everybody else seemed pretty stoic. The only moment was at one point the witness was narrating the photographs as we saw them, you know, describing what we were seeing and why they took the picture and what was important and so forth. And at one point, they advanced the photo before they were really ready to, and the advance was to a close up, very close up of Libby's face and her neck wound, and the whole courtroom just because it was horrible. It was really horrible. So he described using some of the chemical testing the following day to look for any other blood stains, body fluids, things like that. They use this like glucocrystoviolet, which is you know, it's a reagent. It will react to the blood and make it kind of change color and texture and stuff. And so they use that to develop the F tree, the one that has the blood stains on it. Can't really see real clearly these blood stains. I can see why the defense was arguing that it looked like a rune, or it looked like some type of deliberate pattern. It did not look like a random smear. It had a certain kind of linear structure to it. But it is very hard to say, especially given the canvas, so to speak, is a tree trunk. You know, it's got rough bark and stuff. He testified that he was carrying his Glock 19 9mm, that he has also has a Sig Sauer 227 45 caliber, does not own a 40 caliber. So none of the law enforcement officers at the scene today fessed up to having a 40 caliber firearm. And so that's obviously, they are establishing that they closed the perimeter, so they didn't have any random person walking through, and the folks that were there on the scene were not the source of that bullet, that cartridge that was found, because they didn't carry that firearm. So we had our lunch break. We didn't get a morning break. It's just things moved too quickly. So we had a long lunch, and when we came back, Mr. Rosie did the cross, and he described that. Well, so what he wanted to elicit was that this experienced crime scene investigator. He did not have an estimate of the time of death, no opinion on the time of death. Mr. Rossi asked about scavengers. He was asking about, in this area, are there raccoons? Are there coyotes? Are there buzzards? Things like that. That where he's getting at. He's getting at if these girls were lying out there, if the bodies were lying out there all night. Raccoons are nocturnal, coyotes are nocturnal. Like somebody they may have started to get scavenged, and there doesn't seem to be any indication that took place. So the officer described that sometimes they'll use describes the use of insects, which is it's a thing. It's been studied extensively at the Body Farm over there, and I think it's in North Carolina. They will sometimes use that to estimate a time of death, but that would be something that the coroner would do, and that there's just an awful lot of variables involved in estimating a time of death, which is very true, especially with things like body temperature, because the body temperature can be affected by the outside temperature. It's a general, like, people generally will lose their body heat at the same rate, but it can depend on if you're clothed, if you're not clothed. So just a lot of different factors. He did indicate that the reason why they did not take core body temperature samples from the girls was because essentially what he's saying is they don't know if they're dealing with a sexual assault. And so if they're dealing with that, to take the core body temperature, you have to intrude into the abdomen. They don't want to do that because that can potentially interfere with that other type of evidence. So that is why, according to him, they didn't take the core body temperature of the girls. Mr. Rossi was asking if he knew about breaches of the crime scene, about photos being leaked to the public in the early days, photos of the crime scene, that somebody took photos of the bodies and disseminated them, or that other information about the crime scene was leaking. The officer indicated he didn't know anything about that. Seems that Mr. Rosie knows something that we may not hear about until the defense case, but it sounds like he's got some information about just information leaking out. And he wants that to be the case, because the more information is out there in the public, then the less likely it is that whatever Mr. Allen included in his incriminating statements and his confessions that Mr. McLeland has characterized as being details that only the killer would know. The more public information there is out there about the scene and about the bodies and so forth, the less likely that it is in fact unique information. They did try to collect some DNA at the scene, but that was somebody else. He was not aware of any DNA connecting Mr. Allen to the scene, and that is consistent with what we heard in the opening statement. That there's really nothing tying him there. They checked multiple times to look for body fluids, things beyond blood, looking for semen, saliva, sweat, stuff like that typically shows up through these. You use these reagents, or with the light. They described using an alternative light source, which is basically like a blue light, and then they wear orange or yellow, like, filter goggle that enables them to see the fluorescence of the body fluid. So they're using this ALS process. They're not seeing any body fluid, but the one guy who isn't wearing the goggles, he keeps seeing something glitter while they're shining the light over it. And so the glitter is the bullet, the cartridge. The cartridge is partially buried underneath some leaves. He described that they removed leaves to be able to get a clear view of it. And it's kind of at like a 45-degree angle into the ground. This is the primer end. You never actually see the bullet end of this cartridge. It's not visible from that orientation, and they didn't take any photographs of it when they took it out of the ground. This was a big point that came up in cross-examination. Both Mr. Rosie and Mr. Baldwin were emphasizing, like, shouldn't you photograph or maybe like videotape, taking it out of the ground just so you see you have a good record. The witnesses were all pretty adamant. No, you don't do that. No, it's not necessary. No, your job as the crime scene investigator is to secure it, label it, get it to the lab, and then the lab is who will do that documentation of the condition of it. So the defense is clearly trying to raise some questions about just the ability to be sure that be sure of the integrity of this piece of evidence. Is it in the same condition when it gets to the lab as it was when it was initially in the ground? But they haven't, as far as I can tell, really identified anything that was a problem with the bullets. Don't know if they're leading up to the markings on the bullet maybe being somehow related to handling or something like that. Ultimately, my view is that line of cross-examination really wasn't landing. The witness conceded that yes, it did appear that the sticks that were on both Abby and Libby, they were placed there deliberately, clearly placed there deliberately by human hands on top of the girls. And you can tell just from the image that no, this is not a concealment. This is not like somebody tried to cover them up to make them hard to find, because they were still nearly entirely visible. So the placement of the sticks is odd from my perspective. The law enforcement officers didn't necessarily want to concede that it was weird, but they did concede, yes, they were there. They were placed by human hands. They did not collect any trace evidence from those sticks. That bothered me. I didn't like that. If you know that the human hands, almost certainly the human hands of the person that killed these girls, touched these sticks to put the sticks on their bodies, that's where you should be looking for trace DNA, things that are areas where you have a strong suspicion that the killer or the suspect would have touched. They didn't do that. Initially, what they did is he described they picked up the branches and kind of turned them over. After they've, photographed and documented the scene and everything, they turn over the branches. They're looking for additional evidence. Didn't really see any. So they just went ahead and threw these sticks kind of in a pile over to the side and left them. And then about maybe 3 weeks later, he's testified sometime in March. I couldn't hear the date exactly. I think it was in the ballpark of like the 6th, but it was in March. They were sent back to go in and retrieve the sticks. So dispute at some point between people about whether these sticks had evidentiary value or not. Haven't heard anything to this point that anything was ever recovered from them, but it's just unfortunate because, yeah, they're out in the weather for 3 weeks. DNA does degrade environmentally pretty rapidly. So woulda, coulda, shoulda, and that's definitely a defense theme of this investigation, that they made mistakes, didn't do things that they should have done, and they really hammered on this one as something that should have been done differently. The weather, got the report. The weather was a high of 57 degrees and a low of 34. That was on the 13th. Could not remember if the 14th was higher. These crime scene investigators did not take any measurements of the depth of the creek. So we saw a lot of photographs of the creek. The water is significantly higher than it is than just when I went out there, you know, week and a half ago. When I went out there, I remember looking at this river and, you know, this little creek and thinking, gosh, I heard people canoe on this. Like you can't canoe on this. There's not enough water, not enough water to canoe. You're going to bottom out. In these photographs from the 14th, in particular, it's high. I mean, the water is all the way to the edge of the banks. You know, creeping up the banks a little bit. So quite a lot of water, but nobody did take any measurements of it. They photographed some shoe impressions. There were, we didn't see these. They've just been described to us so far. So I don't know if they're going to come in, but we heard about shoe impressions on the south side of the creek, and then a couple on the north side over along the bank. They were skeptical of the value of these shoe prints because of the search. Just the fact that so many people had been going through this area in the course of that search, that it was just maybe not going to be feasible to rule out who they were. Just expect there to be integrity in that. This particular trooper Page had suggested and made a recommendation to bring in a blood spatter expert, based at least in part on the stain on the F tree. He agreed that it seems like it might have been an intentional marking and not a random spatter. So he recommended a blood spatter expert to go in and analyze that, but that did not occur until this last spring. Just one more thing being left till the 11th hour. Mr. Rozzi then made a point to bring out how long does it take to get DNA testing done. He got into a real back and forth with this witness who didn't want to really give him anything. This witness was a hard nut to crack. He was very willing to not know things, to not understand questions, to answer things his own way. And so this back and forth was not particularly fruitful. He was just really trying to make the point that if you had wanted to send off the hair that was found in Abby's hand for DNA testing, could have done that a lot earlier, gotten results and stuff like that. There's no need for that to take 7 years. The best he got was an estimate that sometimes a DNA analysis might take a couple weeks. And sometimes there's a rush. God, I wish DNA analysis only took a couple of weeks where I am. Lord, it takes 6 months or more. It's really super backed up. So I'm just going to flip through and see if there's anything else really significant in this testimony. The only thing I think that mattered was just clarifying that the bare spot that was designated in the diagram and was pointed out in a couple of the photographs, this is not where the cartridge was found. This is something separate and different. And so the cartridge, like I indicated, was between the girls. They had to remove some leaves to kind of be able to see it and photograph it and recover it. And it's kind of sitting there at like this 45-degree angle with the bullet down and the primer end, the head stamp up towards the top. One thing that was sort of amusing about this particular witness was that Mr. Rozzi was hitting him about, well, surely you would just go ahead and remove the bullet from the ground and take a photograph of it in your hand or something like that to just be able to document its condition at that time. And the witness says, no, you would never photograph evidence in the palm of your hand. That would be unprofessional. Well, but then when we get to the FBI, it's just photo of the people holding up the evidence in their hands and having the photos taken. So it was a little bit entertaining. But one thing I will say about this witness, his educational background, he had a bachelor's of fine arts in photography. He took amazing crime scene photos. You could see the orientation was very clear. He knew lots of tricks for things like when you have shadows. A lot of the photos, they're very shadowed areas because you know you're in a forest and the trees cast shadows and stuff. And so he's got techniques to be able to photograph and you know minimize that, make it more visible. Some of the other crime scene photos were not nearly so skilled. His were very very high quality. We started getting some objections, as you might expect. All of the state's objections are sustained. Asked and answered is sustained. They established that they didn't like do a detailed ground layout, like an elevation to establish that the inclines and the drops in the area where Abby and Libby were, or like the elevation difference between where they were and where the creek was. I'm not sure why that would necessarily really matter. The defense wants it because the defense wants to suggest that this area is where searchers would have been naturally inclined to walk if they had been in this area because it's the flattest and so it's the easiest place to be. But it's just not really documented. And so I think we're trying to get some help from the state for that, but you know, didn't get that. He then established just a variety of areas that they did not search. They didn't search across the road 300 north. They didn't search over like further to the east of the cemetery. They didn't search along the road to the Mona, like where the road connects up to the Monon trail. Not sure that any of that matters, but again, just trying to chip away and raise the implication that there's a variety of things that law enforcement didn't do that they should have done. They did establish that in February, it's the visibility in this area is probably about as good as it's ever going to be. There's not a lot of undergrowth in this wooded area. It's a fairly mature forest, so they probably don't have a ton to begin with. But they also said that in the summer you might have some green undergrowth. This is winter; they don't have any of that. All the leaves are off the trees. So what's really interfering with the visibility in this area is not the trees. It's the elevations. It's the configuration of the ground and just where you're able to see from different perspectives. On the south side, the bank is elevated where the driveway goes up towards the Weber house. That's quite a bit elevated above the creek. There's a steep drop off from the creek. We saw some photos from the crime scene looking back in that direction, and you can see it, like, you know, the ground and then way up in the sky, and that's where the road is. So clearly able to look down from the road into this area. The defense is definitely going to be raising this again because they want to suggest everybody who went up and down that road doing the search and was in that area, it would have been visible. Don't know if that's the case in the dark, you know, in the light, maybe. Maybe that makes some sense. But not in the dark. And in the light, the problem is it still took a while to find them in the morning. You know, the search resumed at like 7:30. So if the girls had been taken elsewhere and then brought back to the scene and left there, kind of logical to think it would have to be before 7:30. But if it was so easy to see into this area, then you had, 5 hours between the time the search started and roughly when they found them. It just doesn't seem like it would have taken that long if it was really that visible during the daytime. Somebody did do some detailed distance measurements in this area. So we haven't seen that yet. He just said another CSI did it. I don't know if that's going to still come in, but that was kind of previewed. So that'll give a little bit better, I think, sense of just not just the distance, but also the timing. How, you have a better idea of how long it's going to take to get through all of these different places. If you have a better sense of exactly what distances you're dealing with. A lot of the photographs and the Trooper Page was very upfront about this, and he's completely right. The photographs can be very distorting on the perspective depending on the length of the lens that you're using. Wide angle lens tends to make things look like they're a lot further away than they are. A longer lens, a telephoto type of lens, is going to make them look a lot closer than they are. So it does distort the perspective a little bit and make it more of a challenge to be able to do those just eyeball estimates of what the distances are. So yes, the bullet in the ground was a Smith & Wesson 40 caliber. I'm assuming it was just a regular, it was not like a hollow point or something like that, or they would have said so. But we did not get a picture of the bullet, so we don't know, for example, was this copper, was this lead, what color was it? It's not that uncommon for them to be different colors. Again, not super sure that it matters unless there is something they're going to try to match it to that they got from Mr. Allen. That seems improbable to me because who's got the same ammo 7 years later? If you're a gun person, your ammo is not less than 7 years. So it just doesn't seem that likely to me that there would be something realistic that they could be like, ooh, it's the same, it's the same batch, same lot, same box. That seems very unlikely to me. But it is a point that the defense wanted to establish, that we don't know actually what that bullet looked like when it came out of the ground. Next witness was another CSI, Dwayne. I can't really pronounce this. Datsman, I think it is. It's spelled very strange. He is also Idaho State Patrol. Same deal with training and so forth. He got there at 1:11 p.m. Very specific. Went down to the scene, met with everybody else. He was a helicopter pilot. They wanted aerial photographs of the scenes, so that ended up being his. He was tasked with that. So we did see a lot of different aerial photographs from above. He was not carrying a firearm. He indicated that he left his firearm in the vehicle. So again, more pictures of the body, scars. Got his hand back on his mouth again. This is the gentleman who was not wearing the eye shield when they were doing the ALS testing. So he's the one that saw the glitter and then was able to identify the cartridge there. So I will say this, just from some of the information that kind of floats around out there, this is not consistent with some of the, I guess, rumors that I had heard about this piece of evidence. I had heard that the bullet was like buried 2 inches into the ground. I had heard that there was maybe an issue with the chain of custody, or that the scene had been released and the bullet wasn't discovered until like some days later. Neither of these things appears to be true. They're not true. They found it there that morning. Wasn't buried in the ground. Had a little bit of leaves on it, but otherwise was just kind of lying there on top of the leaf litter. This particular officer described the reason why they didn't try to get DNA off of the tree branches that had been on the girls was because he had never been able to get DNA off of a surface like this. It's the bark is a rough surface. So in his view, it had no evidentiary value. I didn't buy that. Rough surfaces are generally going to be better sources of DNA than smooth surfaces, because they're going to be more likely to catch those skin cells that you're shedding, particularly if you're looking for that trace DNA, that touch DNA, like we're not supposed to call it, but would actually, be somewhat accurate in this particular instance. A rough source is going to typically give you more of that than something smooth. But that was the explanation that we got. Felt that it had no evidentiary value, and they would have collected it if it was valuable. Well, they did later, didn't they? Yeah, they did. They went and got it in March, claimed that they knew which sticks they were, and which ones were the right ones to get. I mean, I guess maybe if they put them in a pile, they would recognize the pile. I sure hope so. I hope these aren't some random sticks that they just found and took into evidence. That would not be good. He described the partial shoe impression that they found over in the area of the soil disturbance. In his view, none of the shoe impressions had evidentiary value. He got into a little bit of a technical description about why that is. That's because when you're dealing with these feature comparison techniques that are not really sciences, they're just eyeballing things and being like, do they look a lot like each other? There's a distinction that's drawn between what they call class characteristics and individual characteristics. So class characteristics are the things that every item of a similar class is going to share. So for example, if you have a pair of Nike shoes of a certain size, they're all going to have the same print. They're all going to have the same footprint when they come off of the manufacturer's line. But after you have worn them and scuffed them and stepped on things and cleaned them and so forth for however many months, years, whatever, then they start to pick up individual wear. And that is what produces individual characteristics. So in these feature comparison types of techniques, typically that is what they're going to look for, is something that can individualize the mark that this particular item made. Now, he didn't really get into why that means it wasn't of evidentiary value, because we heard that the shoe print that was near this disturbance on the south side of the bridge looked like one of the girls' shoes. That seems like that has some evidentiary value to me. Call me crazy, but Mr. Baldwin cross-examined this witness, and got some concessions. It wouldn't have been difficult to to photograph the bullet where you could see the tip. That would be a wise thing to do. But the witness also emphasized that the really important thing to do with this type of evidence is you package it right away because you might damage it. And so that's why their preference is to go ahead and let the lab do those types of detailed documentations. He did not document that the clothes or that Abby herself were damp. Acknowledged that that could be important, and so presumptively he didn't notice that they were damp, and that's why he didn't note it. He was willing to concede these things. This witness was far more willing to be led than the first CSI guy. Mr. Baldwin asked if they had seen any male prints in the area of where that single partial shoe print that looked like the victim's shoe, if they had seen a male print near there, and they said no. So that's something the defense will build on. Hey, there's prints in this area. The girl picked up the prints. These man's supposed to be, marching her down to the creek. Where's his footprints? Absence of evidence, of course, is not evidence of absence, but they're going to gin that up a lot. I think they're going to try to emphasize that there's too much missing, that it isn't just one thing that is a giveaway. It's that if this crime occurred the way that the state said it did, you would expect a lot more to be there. So just more evidence of the control, the conflict, the movements, and so forth. When Mr. Baldwin was asking him about, he would not concede that this was a very odd crime scene, and so Mr. Baldwin asked, isn't it weird to be at a scene where sticks have been deliberately arranged on the bodies? And so the state objected to this, that whether they were arranged is speculative, and that of course is sustained. There was a very testy exchange about the failure to collect the sticks. He indicated he did not know why they were sent back ultimately to get them. Conceded that yes, human hands had to pick up and move these sticks, but he was trying to back away. Well, but there wouldn't have been a transfer. Mr. Baldwin was asking him, well, and so that could result in a transfer of DNA, and the deputy is saying, well, not, or the trooper is saying, well, not if he was wearing gloves. So Mr. Baldwin's like, so was he wearing gloves? The trooper says, well, I don't know. And so then Mr. Baldwin says, so shouldn't you have collected it? And he says, well, we did. And Mr. Baldwin says, when? And he says, the trooper says, a few days later. And Mr. Baldwin gives him a look, gives the jury a look. A few days later, he's not buying that. That was a little bit of a score on him. They did try to minimize the significance of that if it did have evidentiary value, they left it out there in the weather for 3 weeks at least. So this is not just a few days, not a big deal. Very likely that anything that could have been recovered from that would not have lasted. He thought that the photographs of the tree were good enough for the blood spatter expert, that there would be no reason for the blood spatter expert to need to go out there personally. No idea as to whether it was inappropriate that a blood spatter expert would take 7 years to get called out. So they walked through some of the areas where they thought the killer may have walked to look for evidence there. So basically walked from the bridge, down this slide, down to the access road, and in this area they found these footprints. So then over on the north side of the creek as well, then on the bank, they found footprints. But these were not of evidentiary value. Apparently, they took some photos of them. They didn't take imprints or anything like that. So we'll see if we see these photographs come into evidence at any point in time. We have not seen them so far. Saw nothing resembling the set of 3 footprints going down to the creek. That was a point that Mr. Miller wanted to... oh boy, Mr. Baldwin. Now I'm calling him Andy Miller because that's the prosecutor in my jurisdiction. Too many hours without sleep, guys. This is also the witness that testified about how you wouldn't chance doing the core body temperature because you don't want to risk interfering with evidence of sexual assault. Described a lot of these variables. If you're also wet, will change the rate at which you lose body temperature. He didn't touch the bodies to see if they were cold. He said his only recollection of the temperature was that it was 41 degrees at one point on the 14th. So I would assume that was probably either, probably pretty early in the morning or maybe late in the evening, because they did describe that they were there all day. They left that scene at like 10 to 10:30 that evening after processing the bodies. Some other items that they collected another bra, a pink colored sock, another shirt, a drink cup, Jimmy John's drink cup with a straw that looked new, didn't look like old and weathered and stuff. Some Camel cigarette butts, an energy drink can. But all these things were on the end of the bridge on the north side. So if you're following the high trail, following the trail on the path that the girls took, it was at the end before you go onto the bridge and go proceed to cross the creek. Not sure if any of those things will have been tested. Suspect once again that will be what the defense is getting at, that these could be evidence of potential suspects and it wasn't followed up on. Mr. Baldwin did ask a very good question on redirect here. He asked this witness, if you had to do it all over again, would you take a photograph of the bullet as you had pulled it out so that you could see the tip? And the witness conceded that yes, he would. It was a good question just because all that, if you could do it all over again, it's just a good way to frame, to kind of put the witness on the spot. To see how reasonable he's going to be. If he's gonna dig down and say, no, absolutely not, there's just no, I wouldn't, I would do it all the same. He doesn't look reasonable, because concession he made, more information is better than less. And so everything else being equal, yes, you would want more photographs than fewer. Not that that means it's critical that they didn't do it, but just everything else being equal, sure. You would take that. You would take that photograph. The jury's questions indicated they were not really, to me, I mean, you can tell me your read, but they indicated to me the jury is not really buying into where the defense was going today with this argument about the bullet and needing to document it, making sure that it's the same one that the jury gets to see. This was a way that they phrased that question several times. That's why you have to document things, to be sure that the evidence the jury is seeing is the same thing that came from the scene. So the jury asked, is there any reason why the bullet submitted into evidence would be a different bullet? And the witness explained, no, we have processes to make sure that these things are identified, they're tagged, they're stored. If you're going to access it, you have to sign it out. When it goes to the lab, it's secured in a box. So all of these steps are taken to make sure that things don't inadvertently get switched, and the one that the jury is looking at is the same one that was taken into evidence. Second question was, is there any process to ensure the jury is seeing evidence that is not tampered? And again, he just emphasized they have this evidence collection and monitoring system that assigns everything a number and manages it and so forth, and then tracks everybody who accesses that piece of evidence. Brian O'Leahy was the third of the crime scene investigators who testified. And likewise, he got out there early in the morning. He was the lead. He was the lead CSI guy. He had the least experience of all of them at CSI, but he's the one that got the call from whichever deputy it was that called him. So he's the one that kind of organized the others to respond as well and help. That meant he ended up being the lead. This particular witness, he had a really hard time answering the question. Like, there were several times that Mr. Luttrell was handling the direct of these witnesses. And so Mr. Luttrell would ask a question and the witness he would answer something completely different. He would just say something completely different, never answer the original question. So, like, for example, he went on this long description about exactly where he arrived near the old Delphi cemetery and where they went and so forth. The question had been, when did you arrive? And so we never got an answer to the question of when he arrived on the scene. Probably doesn't particularly matter, but he was just going on about, I'm not really sure what county road it is, not from here, and had a long description of the parking lot and who was parked in there and things like that, all in response to when did you arrive? He is also a hunter, and so he was I'm not going to say drawing on that expertise, but they did bring out that, in his opinion, this was prime deer country. When I was out there, I saw deer out there, and I mean, it has certainly crossed my mind. This is a great place to hunt, especially down there in the river bottom, because one, there's wildlife everywhere, but the way that the ground is configured, you have a natural, the cliff is right there. You have this natural bank that's going to stop any shot that you take. Very hard to, accidentally shoot too high and you get a rise and your bullet escapes or something like that. It's so steep that nobody is going to be coming down there. So you don't, really have to worry too much about somebody, being beyond the bullet or whatever. So that had crossed my mind also, that this would be a really good place to hunt. And he did confirm that. That's not necessarily helpful to the state if they're trying to suggest that this bullet only could have been there because Mr. Allen left it there. If there's like hunters crawling all over this area, well then makes it more likely, or even just casual shooters. I mean, let's be real. I don't know how many people are going out and shooting deer with a 40 caliber handgun. I hope nobody is, honestly. That wouldn't be good. But just in general, as an area to be down shooting, target shooting, stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty ideal for something like that. They came back to the trail cameras with this witness, and he said that he was specifically told that none were found. This is not consistent with what we heard from was it Giancarlo, the first witness, that he was on his way to go collect them because they had been specifically told this landowner has several trail cameras. He's got video. So there is an inconsistency there. Again, is it critical? I don't know, but it definitely goes to a potential source of information that they may or may not have followed up on. He also indicated that they at some point had used the county's plat maps, the maps that show the land boundaries and the ownership and stuff like that, to be able to identify the owners and contact them to ask them, do you have trail cameras out here? Do you allow people to hunt on your property? Have you given anybody permission to be out there to hunt? Just because that could, again, potentially give them some more some more individuals, some more leads that they would be able to pursue. He did not believe he was carrying a firearm, but if he was, it wasn't a 40. It was either a Sig Sauer P227 45 or a Sig Sauer P365 9mm. Would not have been anything else. He interacted with the FBI's evidence response team. The evidence response team is who was tasked with securing the clothing that had been found in the water. Remember the tie-dye shirt and the shoes. There were some other items as well. These were photographed. We saw them. There was a handkerchief. There was a sweatshirt, like a hoodie type sweatshirt that was submerged in the water. There was a what he described as a footy sock. So all of these things are wet. The FBI took them off to secure them, get them in the drying room in one of the county offices. They walked around ground zero in a line, doing a step and walk. So they all line up, and step by step, they go down the line to make sure that they haven't missed anything. So that's essentially their way of being able to clear that scene. Just got some more detail, some more kind of specific, trying to narrow down exactly where in this area the bodies were found. So I have a clear image of that. Basically, if you look at a map of the river, the creek, you see the bridge comes across, and the creek starts like takes some turns. And so it's basically in the area like beyond the little curves that the stream takes. But down in what they're calling a floodplain area, so it's lower. It's not all the way down at the water level. It is above a bank, but it's in an area that, yeah, it probably does flood from time to time with the amount of water going through. More photos of the bodies and description of them being processed. I did notice, you know, one of the questions that I had raised from some of these photographs. I'm assuming, which is maybe not a smart thing to do, but I'm assuming that all of the blood was dried because of the time that has elapsed, and the state, you know, is clearly wanting this to be, you know, many hours, almost 24 hours between the time that the girls were killed and the bodies were recovered. So, you know, blood should have all dried by then. It's just very hard to tell in these photographs, though. It's very hard to tell in these photographs. You know, when blood dries, it tends to kind of go brown, get very dull. And it just, the photographs were still in many spots quite bright, quite red, looked like possibly still wet. So I described the strange, what I considered to be kind of strange blood patterns that were on Libby's body. The only other one I can remember now is that on both of her both of her hands were quite bloody, but on one of her hands, I believe it was the right. There was an area in the palm that looked like it had been cleared. Like there's blood all around, but then there's like this clear area. So it almost looked like something had been there, or else something had rubbed it to remove that part of the blood. The other thing that was quite distinctive was there was a blood pattern on her wrist, kind of like this, that looked kind of like if you took a string and dipped it in blood and then pressed it. It was very linear like that, and it didn't have like a clear droplet. It didn't have a clear flow. It didn't have a clear smear. It looked like a line. It was a bizarre pattern. But otherwise, yeah, the real The real weird things here were those strange blood patterns, the strange blood flow that appeared on Libby, and then with Abby being almost completely clean, almost almost pristine. Her hands especially almost completely pristine. And it made me wonder if was she washed or something? I mean, we know the clothes were removed. You can see we see the photographs of the clothes. The jeans are clearly way too big for her, not her jeans. We saw the placement, the location of the shoe and the phone when her body was rolled over. And so they're basically down in the small of her back. The phone is on the ground. The shoe is on top of the phone. The shoe, ironically, it's the same black Nike shoe. It was John O'Keefe's shoe. It's the same shoe. It's the same shoe. Go figure. Only other little detail that kind of came out about that evidence is that the phone case, she had a Harry Potter phone case, a little Gryffindor phone case. And so both of the girls, they were ultimately placed on clean white sheets. They were wrapped up, put in new body bags, and transported over to Terre Haute for the autopsies. We concluded before we were done with this particular witness. He's attending the autopsy, so I'm sure we're going to get some evidence about that. There was a brief sidebar where they were arguing about photographs coming in, and ultimately the judge overruled the defense exceptions, with the exception of the final 7 of them, which she said the state would need to complete the foundation for those with the forensic pathologist. So those we seem to be leading into to the autopsy, and I suspect that's what we are going to be getting tomorrow. We'll get this witnessing of it, and then we'll probably, I would expect, get the medical examiner. So that was really the day. I mean, not a ton of stuff, but yeah, it's really not fun to watch. It's really not fun to watch. Nobody likes photos like that. I think for all that there's always concern with trials like this, that, oh, there's going to be people there just to gratuitously look at this stuff. There's really not. No, nobody is enjoying this process. So guys, oh man, I'm ready to get some sleep. If y'all don't mind, I'm gonna run through your super chats real fast. Thank you so much, Bree, for the $4.99. Thank you. Not sure what happened with the first one, so here's another. Well, thank you for the double down. You're you're in it to win it. Thank you for all you're doing for this case. Everyone, like and subscribe. Thanks so much for that. That's the same one. The Squid. Thank you for taking the time to cover this trial, and also thank you for advocating for public access with your filing. Well, like I said, somebody needs to do it. It's reached a point where it's just become very flagrant. I mean, I've said I at some point, if you wonder what the purpose of something is, you just look at what it is, look at what's happening, look at what it's doing. Like that's it. The chaos is starting to seem like it's by design. That's how they want it. It's not being taken under control because they want it to be like this. They want people to be at each other's throats over line disputes. They want the media to be triangulated against the public. They want all of this to be the case. And it's just so unfortunate and so unnecessary. And if we could all just have these audio recordings as they were coming out and reasonable access to these exhibits, we wouldn't need any of this. I wouldn't need to have traveled 2,000 miles to be here. All these other people who have traveled to be here wouldn't need to. And you know what? The people in the local community, the ones who were traumatized by this crime, yeah, They wouldn't have to be camping out at 2 a.m. in front of their own courthouse just to be able to get that view. K-Rab, she wants to drive everyone away so she can run the trial in the dark. Maybe. I mean, yeah. My other view of it has just been it's a big hazing. This is just a big hazing. This is just to penalize us for showing up as much as you can. Maybe try to discourage people. It's not working so far. Sixth Estate, thank you for your time, effort, and amazing recaps. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here with me. Oksana Luke with a super sticker. Thank you, Oksana. Really appreciate that. Megan Jaw. Do we know if it appears Abby dressed herself in Libby's clothes pre-mortem, or does it appear she was dressed by the killer post-mortem? So we don't know. It hasn't been said. If you were going to ask me to speculate, I would speculate. Looks like she was dressed by somebody else. Kind of hard to tell, but the reason why is because the jeans, for example, were not fastened. They were kind of partially opened, bunched up. The way that her hands were kind of caught up in the sweatshirt, it doesn't look like how a person would put on their own clothes. But I don't know if we have any real information about it. And we certainly don't at this point. I don't know if we're going to get any analysis about that. One of the reasons I had that thought too is because, of course, this hair that's now lurking out there, and we know that it's a female hair. It's possibly a relative of Libby's, but we don't know. We're waiting for confirmation on that. We know that the sweatshirt that Abby was wearing belonged to Libby's sister, and so Libby's sister seems like an obvious source of this hair. And that's one of the things I had thought about was, you just have random hair like inside your clothes or whatever. If somebody was dressing Abby in the sweatshirt and, pulling her hands through and stuff like that, well, then I could see there's a hair inside. It gets all tangled in her hand, and they wouldn't know because her hand is still stuck up inside the sweatshirt. They didn't pull the sweatshirt all the way down to her wrists. That to me would be a very conceivable explanation for how that hair got there and the position that it was in. But we don't know. We'll have to see if anything else about that comes out. Rumor has it. Thank you, Andrea, for being we the people. You are amazing. Well, thank you. Gray, your emotion. Emojis. I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed writing this one. I really did. I enjoyed writing this one. It's not often you get to write emotion where the law is just so unequivocally clear on your side that it's really easy to explain it. And so then it just became an exercise of telling the story of what's happened with this trial and why it matters. So the crypto tax lawyer, thank you for fighting the good fight for truth and justice. Get some sleep, fellow Esquire. We appreciate you more than you know. Well, thank you. I will get a few hours at least before I head back over to the courthouse and try to get some more on the courthouse steps. Nicola Maxwell, please get some sleep. We can hear this tomorrow. Look after yourself. So happy your friend won her first fight. Take care of yourself. Well, thank you. I will get sleep. Carazola X, I don't think Alan is going to make it to appeal if he loses. He called out some of the guards and a P gang. In the 2 years he'll wait for appeal, guards will find a chance to look away when gang scolds him. Yeah. Big concern, his safety in there. I mean, you're not alone. It's a comment that has come up many times in the courtroom from people that are talking about this and concerned about it. His safety is very, very legitimately a concern. Sixth Estate, did the girls appear muddy at all on the lower bodies and feet? Libby, yes. Libby was very muddy, especially all through her legs, on her back when she was rolled over. Her back was just very covered in debris and stuff. Abby, Almost not at all. Like I said, Abby was almost perfectly pristine. And the only place where this is another reason why potentially it's a situation of another person dressing her. The only place where she really did seem to have some debris and dirt and stuff was on the very bottom of her feet. And so but her feet are, at least partially inside the shoes. So I don't know about you. I would never put my shoes on with a bunch of junk on my feet. That would drive me nuts. You're walking all over it. It's stuck in your shoes. No, you brush your feet off and then stick them in your shoe. So, but that was really the only dirt on Abby that we saw at all. She was extremely clean, extremely clean. Nell Wood, Andrea, you are a damn rock star. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's just emotion. It's just a lawyer thing. It's just what I do. But I do appreciate that. Pantoufle. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to say it. Pantoufle. Found you through Peter Tragos. Peter Tragos is awesome. Glad you found your way here. Glad you made it in the courtroom. Great coverage. Thanks to the people who helped you get in. Stay strong. Well, thank you. I'm going to keep right on trucking. Because if there's one thing I can do, I can dig deep and take it to the final bell. TF, thank you for fighting for access and transparency and taking a stand for the girls and for us all. Well, it's my pleasure. I think it's extremely important that people see this trial. It's very important. It's critical for justice. Everybody wants the person who did this to this girls to pay the price. And so we all are invested in knowing if that person is Richard Allen or not. Wendy DB, thank you, Andrea. Well, thank you. Daniel Baker, during graphic pictures, did you make any observations of Richard Allen? So I really didn't. I couldn't see him very well from where I was at in the courtroom. I'm basically kind of behind him and at a little bit of an angle, and he's so small that pretty much anybody in the chairs ahead of me, they block my view. I really can't see him at all. I did see just at various points in the day, he's taking notes. He does, seem to be engaged in the process that way, periodically turn and talk to Mr. Baldwin. But with respect to the photographs in particular, I did not see any specific response from him. Skeptic Curiosity, thanks, Andrea, for all you're doing. Well, you're very welcome. Honestly, it's kind of an adventure. It's kind of fun. And I can't lie, I like a good fight every once in a while. I haven't thrown down in a little bit. So, sometimes you just got to file a motion just to shake off the dust. Brutally honest. Andrea, did you notice if there were sticks placed above Abby's head? Just asking because EF said he gave one of the girls horns/antlers with sticks. No, I did not. I did not see sticks above Abby's head. With Abby, the sticks were basically, it was on, let me check my diagram because I want to be sure I remember which side it was on. It was on her left-hand side, and it was basically just like a cross. Basically just like a cross of sticks. I did not see anything near her head. I didn't see anything up near Libby's head either. So I don't think there were antlers. I don't think the twigs. I don't think that explains what Elvis Fields was talking about. Kamala Norris, best advice: if someone pulls a pew pew on you, run away. You don't want to go to the second location. Please be aware of your surroundings. Stay safe. Yeah. Tough situation. I mean, I know they always say don't get in the car, right? Don't get in the car. It's hard because, you feel like your life is threatened, and it's very normal, I think, for anybody under a situation like that. Everybody wants to live. The tiniest little amoeba that doesn't have a brain wants to live and will fight to live. And so it's just natural to do whatever you think is going to extend your life and minimize the risk that you're going to get shot, get killed, whatever. But yeah, what could happen to you in that second location could be far worse. Michael Osbrook, I'd like a job. Are you hiring, Andrea? You kidding me? Well, no. Can't say I am. I mean, is this a job? Is this a job? I don't know. We're all sitting out here in this line out front of the courthouse in the morning. By about 4 o'clock in the morning, we're all like, what are we doing here? What are we doing with our lives? Have we really lost our minds? Is this really what we're doing? Yeah, we are. That's what we got to do if we're going to get access to this. Icosaplex gifted 10 memberships. That is amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. That's awesome. Astrid Lee, how could one person do this in a short time span and not get caught? Big question that I have after seeing the scene, and just, yes, having that kind of perspective on what has transpired here, what it would have taken. I was already skeptical about this for several reasons. The ability to control two of the girls with one person, one gun. Obviously not going to say that's impossible. Of course not. But it's just, there's more opportunities for somebody to be able to escape, somebody to be able to get away, somebody to be able to, make some noise. The complete absence of noise. Having been down there, you hear every tiny rustle in the leaves. There will be a squirrel, 100 yards down the road, jumping through trees, and you will hear it. I don't know if the sound kind of carries in there or what, but it is. Everything is very audible. The lack of sound. It had been reported, and it seems to be confirmed through these photographs today, that there's no signs of a struggle. This was a big one for me. I don't know how one person kills two people and neither of them struggles, because it seems to me like you would have to either leave the one alone to be able to kill the other out of sight of the one, in which case, again, now you're giving that one an opportunity to escape. You're not doing it in front of them, because there's no way you're not going to struggle at that point. As soon as you know that it's coming, yes, you're going to fight for your life. Even the tiny little amoeba will do that. So they didn't know it was coming, and that seems very, very difficult to accomplish with one person. And so now, yeah, all of this is just kind of, to me, being built up on more and more by seeing this scene and what was done. The fact that the bodies clearly were moved, for some reason, in some way, in some fashion. The blood dripped in ways that is not consistent with where they came to rest. The placement of the branches, the dressing of Abby, very much, like I said, does look like somebody else dressed her. And all this happened in 20 minutes, got him off the bridge, down the hill, across the creek. Doesn't make a lot of intuitive sense to me. So I continue to have questions about that myself. Connie Robledo with a super sticker. Thank you so much for that. The Squid, with your description of the condition of the girls, it makes no sense that we haven't heard about the cops making a real effort to find where the girls were killed. It seems obvious someone ran out of time to clean them up. Yeah, I mean, they had 7 years to find suspects and locations and stuff, and they just didn't. I mean, the state they're laying the groundwork to just double down on the girls were killed here. I mean, I'm open to hearing more. Like, yes, if massive amounts of blood could have seeped into the ground and then they were just moved, like a short distance in the positioning, for some reason that isn't quite clear to me why Richard Allen would do that, but they're going to try to establish that large blood stain as being where the killings took place. So I'm going to want to see the testing of that blood stain. Is it one of the girls? Is it both of the girls? If it's just one of the girls, then where's the other? If it's both of them, I'm going to still want to see how do we estimate the volume here? Because it looks like I mean, it looks like maybe being very generous, a gallon. Maybe being very generous, a gallon. I think that's being overly generous, honestly. It's a liter. Call it 2 liters. Call it 2 liters. That's not enough. That's not enough. There's a lot of blood that should be there, and I'm just not seeing it. So great. Show me the drain. You know, how fast does this ground drain? You know, maybe if this blood could have drained away, maybe it's possible. But I am very, very skeptical of this at this point in time. Some guy with cancer, on a scale from 1 to 10, how bad is Judge Goal? Is one bad or one good? I mean, I got Judge Goal at like -5 right now, and she is her demeanor in front of the jury is radically different than it has been in these pretrial hearings. I had commented before about how she, like, during the motions in limine, she just would not even hide her contempt for the defense, her disdain. It's like she's got a sneer up there on the bench at all times. She is not doing that at all with this jury. She is very much in the background. She's got a little bit of that Judge Bev Canoni buttering up the jury kind of demeanor to her. But that's the bulk of what she's doing over the course of the day. There are not a lot of objections. Of course, I'm not seeing what's happening at the sidebars because they're going behind their little screen, and you know, she's got the white noise on, so we can't hear what's happening, of course. So who knows what's happening that's not in the view of the audience and the jury. But when it is in their view, yeah, she's on her best behavior right now. So that is an improvement. But the disregard for the law, that's, you don't come back from that with me. When you're a judge, you have one job. You have one job. It's to respect and uphold the law. And I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that at all. I'm seeing a sense from her that she is the law. And she's not. You know, if she wants to be the law, she needs to find somewhere where she can, like, go run for king instead of for judge. AKA Radar, appreciated more than words. Andrea, thank you, thank you. Well, you're very welcome. Thanks for being here with me. Simcha with a super sticker. Priscilla Stevenson with the super stickers. Thank you guys so much. And Typically Unique, just saying thank you. Well, thank you to all of you guys. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. Really does mean a lot to me. It's making all of this worthwhile. Sweet Beamy, tomorrow's autopsy report, will there be toxicology? If they weren't killed there, all unimaginable things could have happened. Thank you for your ethical coverage. Well, that's a nice thing to say. I appreciate you. I appreciate you putting it like that. I am trying to be sensitive, and fair. You know, I'm not here with an axe to grind. I just really want to know what happened, and I want to know who's to blame. You know, I want to know who's to blame for this. I would expect, yes, there will be a toxicology. That would be pretty typical in a case like this. It gives you information about, you know, the story of how the crime took place. Were they drugged? Were they, you know, just whatever. Tells you a little bit more. I am looking forward to the details of the autopsy. I mean, not looking forward, obviously, but it's very important information, and it's information that there's really no substitute for it. That examination just provides a lot of details, a lot of the parts of the story that we can't get from other places. Shell Erba, you said one of two questions posed by the jury were asked. Do you know why only one was? No, because we don't know what the other one was. We typically, when a jury asks a question and it's not allowed to be asked, it's because it violates the rules of evidence in some way. It might be asking about something that's been excluded. It might be asking for something that's inadmissible. So I don't know the details of what it is or why. But just noted, I think that is the first one so far that they haven't been allowed to ask. I did see from Lawyer Lee's recap on Saturday that they asked a bunch of questions on Saturday as well. So this is an attentive jury. They're sharp. They're focused on the details. The entire day, they were riveted. They were riveted. They're paying very close attention to what they're saying. So that's a very good sign. It means that they're concerned about the details. They know the details matter, and they are really invested in getting this right. And at the end of the day, that's really all you want from a jury. You want them to want to get it right. So that's it, guys. This went on slightly longer than I intended to. Dory, thank you bunches too. I am going to crash now. I am going to get myself a couple hours of sleep before I have to head back out there and try not to lose my voice. I think I'll get it back. I'm pretty sure that I know I sound terrible, but I'm pretty sure it's mostly from just yelling at the fights on Saturdays. I work the corner, and that's really that's like my main job. My job is I put the stool up in the corner for the fighter to sit down in between rounds. I keep track of the water bottle, and then you yell. You got to yell. You yell them. Their encouragement. What openings you see, the things that they're doing. All that stuff. You yell constantly. So I was thinking about it. What did it work out? 9 minutes? No, because everybody fights 2-minute rounds. So. But that's 18 minutes, 18 minutes of solid yelling. That'll do a number on your voice. So that was on me. My bad, guys. But I will try to get it back. And I'm sure the lack of sleep isn't helping. So today on the notepads, I'd say about 10 pages shy of a full legal pad, maybe a dozen pages shy. Not quite as many as yesterday. Because mostly for today, I'm tracking all the exhibits. I'm tracking them by number and the description of what they are and stuff, so that I have good notations of that. Because what happens is later on in trial, as it proceeds, people start referring back to the things that are already admitted. And so they'll have the witness on the stand, and they'll be like, well, showing you what's been previously admitted as Exhibit 42, doesn't this completely undermine what you just said? Not really, but something along those lines. So then you're going what's Exhibit 54? I can't see it. So now I have my record of the exhibits that I'm trying to maintain, so that we can keep track of that kind of thing. But otherwise, yeah, the testimony itself far less impactful than just what we saw, what we witnessed today. Absolutely horrifying, gruesome, stomach turning, appalling. Once again, just really appalled for the families to have to sit in the courtroom, and witness that, and just kind of amazed that they are doing that. It's obviously so important to them, because I just imagine what it feels like to see that. And so to take that on, they have a strong purpose and a strong compass guiding them to make it through that courtroom. So I really do hope the best for them, whatever that might be, with this particular case, regardless of the outcome. You really want the family to be able to get some closure. I don't know if they're going to get it, but all right, guys. That's it for me. I am on my last legs. Thank you again for joining me. Really appreciate all of you. It's been amazing these last several days, just seeing how many of you are turning out interested in this trial. That's what's keeping us going. That's why we're doing it. So I'm going to keep plugging forward, and I will certainly let you know if Judge Gold does anything with my motion. I'll tell you straight up, I'm honestly not really expecting her to. The path of least resistance for her is to ignore it. She can. So she knows that if she rules on it, that's what tees up, the next step, the ability to take it further. So I think she's just gonna not find time to deal with it. You got a built-in excuse because you're in the thick of the busy part of trial. But hope springs eternal. Something could happen. And bottom line, we've got the record now of what's going on in there and how wrong it is. So With that, guys, I am going to say goodnight. Thank you again. I will look forward to, fingers crossed, getting in the courtroom tomorrow and bringing you my recap at the end of the day. So I will see you all then. Take care. Have a wonderful evening.